Hey everyone, and welcome to Wrestling Territories Podcast. I'm Troy, I'm your host, and welcome to the channel. And tonight we're going to talk about Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez, their time as World Tag Team Champions and how it started and how it ended. And it was kind of a controversial way, and I've talked about this a little bit on other podcasts, but we're going to look at it in a little bit more in depth tonight. Hang tight. Okay, so Rude and Fernandez, good tag team, but it was kind of interesting how they became the World Tag Team Champions. It wasn't like they had been teaming up for a very long period of time. They basically started teaming up just a little bit before they won the World Tag Team titles. Now, what happened was Manny Fernandez turned on the Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant, went with Paul Jones, money situation there, and the thing was he. Um, just turned heel basically, and then eventually they put him with Rick Rude, and they become the tag team champions just right after Starrcade '86. And a lot of people will say they don't understand exactly why they became the tag team champions. Not that they didn't deserve to be champions; they were both heck of athletes. They both have been champions. I mean, Manny Fernandez and Dusty Rhodes at one time were the world tag team champions, and Rick Rude had been the world class American, and well, then became world champion in world class wrestling. But it wasn't like they didn't deserve belts, it was just so odd that they became champions, and it didn't quite make a lot of sense, but we're gonna see if we can figure this out. Now, they became the World Tag Team Champions on December 6th, 1986 on WCW Saturday Night, and it was, just right after the Starrcade match where the Rock and Roll Express defeated Ole and Arn Anderson to retain the World Tag titles. Now, I do remember Ricky had a bum arm. I don't remember if it was kayfabe or not. And if it wasn't, it might have been the reason why they would have, switched the titles to Rude and Fernandez. Now, their title reign was 171 days, and here's where it gets a little funky. And if you follow my podcast before, I've talked about this a little bit with Paul Jones's Army, but basically what happened was Rick Rude left the NWA to go to the WWF. And after 171 days, they were the champions till from December to May. And what happened was, and it said it was kind of like a phantom matchup. So let me see if I can break this down. They were awarded in a phantom match in Spokane, Washington. They actually defeated Manny Fernandez and Ivan Koloff, who was subbing for Rick Rude. Now, at the time, we were all told that Rick Rude was injured and that Ivan Koloff was coming in to substitute a little bit. Now, there was a match with the Rock and Roll Express and Rude and Fernandez that happened. I want to say it was like maybe Spartanburg, South Carolina, or something like that, and they defeated them. Now, they kind of cut it towards the end of the match. You see them roll out of the ring with their hands in the air, and that's when they say they became the World Tag Team Champions. But actually, it wasn't. It was a little time after that, but they defeated Ivan and Fernandez. It really is a complicated storyline there because, like I say, Rude just left and went to the WWF. And what I understand too was he took his World Tag Team title with him. I don't know. I've heard that story. I don't know if it's 100% true. That's why they went from using the silver and gold looking Eagle World belts, that pretty cool looking belts, and then it took the Globe with the blue strap tag team titles, and you start seeing the Rock and Roll Express with them. So that's why I think that happened. Those silver and gold tag belts were beautiful. They were the 50th anniversary tag team belts, and the Rock and Roll Express was awarded those tag team belts um, for the 50th anniversary. But from what I understand, Rick Rude may have took that belt with him, is why they switched and not used it no more or used those belts anymore. And maybe Raging Bull got the other one. I don't know. But uh, like I say, they started using the newer looking tag team belts. Were really cool looking belts too. But the silver and gold was much better looking than the gold Eagle belts. But either way, their title reign was 171 days. They defended them against people like, the Rock and Roll Express and the Road Warriors. They had some pretty big feuds and matches with the Road Warriors. And those ended up to be pretty good matches. You can find them on YouTube. But that's just a lot of uh, headache there towards the end because even though the Rock and Roll Express got the belts back, it was actually from Ivan Koloff and Raging Bull and not Rick Rude and the Raging Bull. Okay, so we're going to watch a real quick match between Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez versus Johnny Ace, and I forget the other guy exactly, but Mike Force, that's his name. And we're going to take a look at that real quickly. And of course, I had to keep it kind of covered so I don't get a strike on me. But anyway, let's take a look at that match real quick. Now, I'm not going to say they wasn't a dominated tag team. They were a good tag team. They went in and kind of did like the Road Warriors and just knocked these guys out. Didn't take long and they pinned them pretty quickly. Even the Raging Bull even had to take his vest off. But they were a good tag team. It's just why did they become the tag team champions? And I've heard different stories, and I've heard the thing where Ricky Morton was legitimately hurt, and they ended up changing the belts that way. And I've heard stories where they were not exactly sure why they put the belts on Bull and Rude, but it's kind of interesting because Paul Jones had been kind of known as the mid card guy, just kind of hanging out at the beginning of the match or beginning of the night to about the mid card and feuding basically with Jimmy the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. That was his biggest feud. But then all of a sudden, he has a tag team that becomes the World Tag Team Champions, and that propels him up to the main event status. Now, of course, they make it to the Jim Crockett Memorial Cup. They don't win it, but they do make it there, and they're the number one seed, I guess, is what it was. Number one and number two. But anyway, they were the tag team champions still at that time. And all of a sudden, Paul Jones, who most people see in like the first few matches, is now main eventing manager and with a tag team that's the World Tag Champions. So it was very confusing exactly why they were tag team champions. But again, they were a good team. It's just they hadn't been together for a very long period of time. And had they been on, maybe together longer, it might have helped. And maybe Rude would have stayed. I don't know. I don't know exactly why Rude left. I've heard money was part of it. He just got lured to the WWF. It's because, the WWF was really taking off at that time. It's hard to say. So you're looking at 1987, and Rick Rude, when he does go to the WWF, becomes Intercontinental Champion, has some runs at trying to become the World Champion, although that never happens. But it helped propel Rick Rude, so I can't blame him for going. It helped him a lot, right? I mean, he goes from there back to WCW, where he becomes the NWA International World Champion, not the WCW World Champion. But anyway, he becomes a U.S. champion, has a huge feud with Sting, part of the Dangerous Alliance. So it did work out good for Rude in the long run. He had a successful career for sure. And the Bull, I believe, did too. But Bull was kind of, he was kind of ending his career there a little bit. And it wasn't long after he lost the tag team titles with Ivan Koloff to the Rock and Roll Express that Bull was gone. And I did remember seeing him pop up places like AWA. So he was there for a bit. But, as far as Rick Rude and Raging Bull, I thought they were a good team. It was just interesting to see them as a tag team and being the champions in just a few weeks. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is an interview between is Paul Jones and it was Manny Fernandez and it was Rick Rude. It was on NWA Pro Wrestling with Bob Caudle, and Bob Caudle's one of my favorites of all time. I want to take a look at this together and just the interview that they had and just how Paul Jones sounded different than he used to because he had tag titles. He was put in a higher position. And don't get me wrong, Paul Jones, and I talked about this in my last podcast with the TV title, he was a 5-time television champion in the Mid Atlantic Territory area. And Paul Jones at one time was one of the most popular people in the NWA area. And the thing was, he became a heel, turning on Ricky Steamboat, doing all that stuff. And he became a very big heel manager, but it was always in the beginning of the card or the middle part of the card. And so, but he has to talk a little different, and he talks good about his tag team. So let's check it out.
Paul would never be able to do it, that you never would put together the champions. Well, let me tell you something, Bob. That's why I brought out one of the tag team belts right here to show the people. But the reason they said I never would do it because I was too tight. And if I'd have known a long time ago what I know now, all I had to do was get the money ball players. And you're looking at the world champions right here. And this is one of the belts right here that I brought out here to show you people what everybody is after, including all the way to the top, Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, the Jayhawks, the Road Warriors, the new U.S. Tag Team Champions, Ronnie Garvin and Barry Windham. And the list goes on. And we're not forgetting the Rock and Roll Express. Well, let me tell you something. They say that they had a bad day. Well, you got a lot of more bad days coming, Rock and Roll, if you mess with R&R.
Sorry, my mic had went off. So it's a little bit of different interview, and it was something Paul Jones did that absolutely was different for him. And he had to talk up a main event style matchups as opposed to talking about Jimmy Valiant cutting his hair all the time, right? But Paul Jones was never known for his interviews and being really good. A lot of people made fun of him. I always liked Paul Jones. I thought Paul Jones was kind of a funny guy. It was unique to see him in that position, but it unfortunately just never materialized. And then after Rick Rude left and he lost the tag team belts, Paul Jones was brought in to a situation where he ended up having powers of pain for a while, and that worked good against the Road Warriors for a bit. But he was never back in that main event status again. That was pretty much it. They held the powers of pain, and Ivan Koloff held the 6-man tag team titles for a bit, but he was never put back in that position again as a world champion manager in a main event like that. I mean, it just kind of went away for him. And but again, Rick Rude, Raging Bull, comment on what you think. Did you like them as a tag team champions? Should they have been tag team champions, or should they not been tag team champions? Comment and let me know what you think about that, because I personally think it's good that they were the tag team champions. I just think they should have waited a little longer after being a tag team for a bit. It probably would have helped out a lot. But with Rick Rude going to the WWF and all this stuff, it did better his career. So you can't blame him for doing it, right? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this short little podcast. Like I said in the past, I'll be doing a longer one soon. I got one coming up where I'm going to be doing a Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard feud and talking about that in depth and how that feud between Dusty and Tully was much better, in my opinion, than Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes feud. But anyway, we'll get your opinion on that too when you see that video when it comes out. But until next time, God bless. We'll see you soon.